Okay, so how does learning happen? We can frame learning theories around two clusters, one called correspondence theories and one called coherence theories. Framing different learning positions as part of this complex landscape, these two theories help us understand how humanity has understood the learning process. Correspondence basically works the idea of an internal reality knowing is connected to an external reality, so the two match up. So the most common is behaviorism, which refers to the notion of punishment and rewards to get a desired behavior, which is very successful at acquiring certain types of learning, as our little cartoon shows here, but not necessarily a learning process that is understood, but a behavior that can be elicited from those based on the punishments and constraints. And that context really does frame the learning process. The other form of learning in a correspondence theory is mentalism, which is the idea that you have an internal representation of an external reality. And very dominant in that is the computer metaphor, and that a lot of what we do is about connecting to a perfect model. So the correspondence of the internal representation to the external reality. The problem with that is we don't have an internal representation in our heads. That's just the way in which we've come to know learning. So if we shift from correspondence around to coherence theories, these theories start to focus on less the notion of corresponding to an external reality and far more the idea of connecting an internal coherence that will match or fit to what's going on outside. The difference in coherence theory is that the assumption is that it's not about matching, but more about adaptation, evolution, and best fit. So most dominant understood by educators is the notion of constructivism, which refers to a construing individual. As Piaget understood it, the notion of continuously construing to fit internal understandings to external experiences, so the two would match up. So here you have the notion of embodied learning, which is an ongoing constructing process as you continuously construing, updating one sense of the world as prompted by new experiences. However, this only focuses on the individual, and social constructivism takes this the next step further. So the theories of Lev Vygotsky and the notion of co-participation in the community of construing individuals, where the way in which the community operates starts to elicit the learning process. So very much an embodied social learning. As you can see here from the example of my students observing in schools as lessons are taught, the learning process is about being embedded in the situation rather than just learning the theories of how to teach. And this type of process really brings about a different notion of how learning happens, because it's really about adapting in the way in which the community starts to learn as a joint activity. However, this also brings a critique of the ways in which we communicate within that community in order to enable learning. So here you have cultural construing based on discourses, and which feeds our cultural critical discourse, in that there are gender theories, race theories, class, sexuality, ability, all of which we have predisposed ways of knowing that cause us to think in certain ways. And this refers to the notion of something like this, where previously to the last financial issues we had a society very much based on finance and the economy and society, then the planet. And as we start shifting to a new consciencization, something that Freire was well known for, we're now shifting our notions to be focused way more on the planet, because we see that the environment is being affected by our actions, and so we're refocusing our way of interpreting events. And so this type of shift causes us to think differently. This is something that helps us in phys ed to understand how we perceive the ability or performance or the way of becoming able to do something as not necessarily the same as everybody being exactly the same model. And then we've evolved the last set of coherence theories, which is really around co-evolving complex systems and ecological theories. Now these theories have sort of shifted us to start to think about how the system is evolving that we are a part of. So really humans are just a subsystem of the larger complex web of relations. And that really, rather than just human learning, we're looking at more than human learning and how we as a subsystem interacts in that larger. And so this gives a sense of why correspondence theories were understood as something that was internal and external, because we always thought the external was fixed. Whereas in reality, the external subsystems are always evolving, and we are therefore co-evolving in relation to those systems. And so therefore learning becomes how the system evolves. So as you look at all these things put together, we go back to our two sets of theories, that gives a sense of learning as something that's a co-evolving complex system, where the cognitive external internal was a way of knowing that has now led towards a construing process for individuals and a community construing, and then a culture of discourses that allows that community to construe, that now leads to the notions of a complex system. And actually, complexity thinking tries to embody all these notions of learning. It's like an umbrella, and it gives us a way of seeing learning as more than what an individual does. If we consider the class as a collective learning system, it creates a co-evolving process between agents of the collective and between the collective and the context that affords its existence. Complexity thinking then allows us to consider that learning is relative to how a system of agents, drawn together by some form of attractor, adapts to an environment that enables the forming system to thrive. Good teaching then becomes more about creating the conditions for learning, drawing agents together, then encouraging collective exploration, discovery, and awareness by structuring experiences that engage, stimulate, and challenge, promoting individual and group self-regulation.